I've got a fun one for you guys today. This is my new mobile clamp wall. The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Woodcraft. Just get started. As configured, it's holding 54 parallel clamps, 14 F-style clamps, and 16 pipe and bar clamps, with room to grow. Now that's probably more clamps than most people need, but you guys know the old saying, you can never have too many clamps. On the sides, I've got pegboard for even more storage. And the whole thing was built in a weekend using basic home center materials. Miraculously, Lowe's had straight boards. I quickly called the manager to report this manufacturing error. So let's kick it off by cutting down some 2x4s for the Outriggers. Now look, I'm no engineer, so when I saw Becca over at Southern Pine Design Company building something similar, I shamelessly asked if she'd share her dimensions. She said yes, which was super generous, and it gave me a good solid starting point, so thank you, Becca. I also consulted with one thing less qualified than me, artificial intelligence, and this is what it gave me. Ultimately, I went with a 2-to-1 height to base ratio. Well, it's actually more like 1.9 to 1, but who's counting? For the Outriggers, I'm doubling them up, mostly because I want you to hear this cool sound. While the Titebond works its magic, I'll move on to making the wall. Now, because I'm, let's say, particular, I start my screws in the top and bottom plates and let them poke out just a little bit. Those little points will dig into the studs, keeping things from slipping around as I drive the screws. Look guys, I'll be the first to admit that my first day on a real job site would probably go a lot like this.
And I think it's best if we both go our separate ways.
I don't understand.
And hey, using your drill as a hammer? That's a certified pro move. Tell your friends. One thing you might consider is offsetting the wall, especially if you're going to have a lot more weight on one side than the other. I didn't think of it at the time, so mine's centered and everything worked out okay, but just something to think about. With only 2 screws holding the wall down on each side, I threw on some T-straps for reinforcement. Once the angled supports are in, these might be redundant, but they're cheap, they're shiny, and they make me feel better. And speaking of the angled supports, let's make them. The ends receive 2 miter cuts so that they come together in a nice upside-down V-shape. For additional structural integrity, I'm going to glue the 2 pieces together before attaching to the wall. And for projects like this, when I want to move things along, there's really nothing better than Titebond's speed set. Because patience is a virtue, and I'm short on virtue these days. When it comes to installing these, there's no measuring involved. I just make sure it's centered, and then raise it up until the supports intersect with the top corner of the Outriggers. And while I plan to attach these with lag screws, a little glue certainly won't hurt here. Now I want the heads of these 3/8 lag screws to be flush with the surface, so I'm supposed to be counterboring, but I totally forgot. So because the pilot hole is already there, I'm going to use this fancy drill jig thingy to accurately place the counterbores. If you counterbore first, you don't need this thing. Behind the supports, I'm adding little filler blocks. The angle should already be set on the miter saw from the previous cut, but I'll double check. The point of this filler is to make more screw surface for the casters. And by the way, if you forego the T-straps, you could probably just cut one single piece that spans between the 2 supports for a cleaner look. Mine's getting covered with pegboard, so I don't really care. Now the overhang is trimmed flush with the Outrigger and made pretty with some sanding. Now with the caster held in place, you can see why I needed that extra support. And I'm going with more lag screws to attach the casters. Honestly, for as much as I love building fine furniture, there's something super satisfying about a low-stakes, high-reward shop project like this. You don't sweat the details, and you still end up with something that's incredibly useful and just makes my time in the shop that much more enjoyable. That's a win. So come to think of it, I haven't even mentioned why I'm making this in the first place. Well, when I first moved into this space, I had the genius idea that we do all of our assembly in the smaller bay. So of course, we put the clamps there. But that bay is now more of a digital fabrication area with a CNC and a laser. And that means every time I need clamps, I've got to navigate an obstacle course, which is great for my daily step count, but bad for efficiency. And while I trip and fall all over myself, let me tell you about my next awesome course coming to the Wood Whisperer Guild. This is my counter height bar stool, and it's the latest course that we've added to the Wood Whisperer Guild. This project has it all: elegant curves, eye-catching joinery, sleek brass accents, and a durable woven seat that's as comfortable as it is beautiful. Along the way, we'll dive into material selection, working with templates, building custom template sleds, mastering advanced domino joinery, shaping graceful curves, applying brass details, and weaving a supportive seat that'll hold up for years. The best part? You can mix and match wood species and webbing material to create a version that fits your home and personality. So come along for the ride, and let's build a bar stool that's anything but basic. You can get more details at thewoodwhispererguild.com. Next, I needed to plan the clamp layout. I decided to go with a stacked orientation in hopes of saving as much space as possible. But it's important to note that if you do a stack of 3, it's kind of a wash in terms of how much width it takes up. At 4, you start to save space, and at 6, which is what I'm doing, you're really starting to maximize your storage. Laying it all out on a foam board let me plan the bracket spacing and figure out where I'd need to put blocking inside the wall. Of course, all this depends on your layout and what you're using to hold your clamps. In my case, I'm using simple heavy-duty shelf brackets, so I'm spacing out the blocking to make sure that every screw can grab wood. For the wall skins, I'm using some leftover T111 that I had since we moved into the firehouse. You can really use anything you want to skin the wall, but I recommend something that's at least a ½ inch thick. That'll go a long way for not only beefing up the stability of this thing, but giving you screw surface if you want to attach things that are on the lighter side. Of course, anything heavy, you're going to want to grab a stud or the blocking. First side's done, and a quick stress test. Seems solid? Probably. Now I also had some pegboard lying around and figured this was a great excuse to use it up. Only had enough for one side though, and I'm not buying more. I use a handsaw to trim it flush, mostly because I was having some difficult family situations that day, and doing hard things is the way I cope. I use the same logic for exercise. Now, I'm no mental health expert, but give it a shot, it might work for you. Now, I think we're at a point in our relationship where I can show you my rack.
Yeah. Then he said,
These are Wood River clamp racks from our sponsor, Woodcraft. They come in multiple styles, including one for parallel clamps, but I'm only using the pipe and F-style versions here. They're simple, sturdy, and nest together beautifully for a seamless look. Plus, they're stronger than anything that I could build. Man, that looks good. Okay, so that was just the warm-up. Now for the big boys. I'll put a link to the brackets I'm using, but they're really just 12x8 heavy-duty shelf brackets. At the time of filming, these were $38 for 10, which will give you 5 stacks of clamps. Compare that to some of the specialized racks made by woodworking companies that'll get you 4 stacks for like $100. These were a no-brainer, and they're rated at 600 pounds a pair. So this part, admittedly, was tedious. I have to measure each one, mark the hole locations, drill pilot holes, and then drive the screws. The second bracket in each pair was a little bit easier because I built a spacer that's just a smidge larger than the size of the clamp bar. And you can also see now that you really need to plan ahead to make sure that your blocking is located in the right place. All right, let's load it up. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for. If you're wondering why I have so many clamps, the answer is simple: sponsorship. And sponsorship doesn't mean getting stuff for free. It means getting stuff in exchange for something of value other than cash. Back in my Powermatic days, I'd ask for a few clamps here and there, and they would send them. So I kept asking, and they kept sending them. Eventually I realized I should probably stop before I single-handedly cause a global clamp shortage. Don't judge, you would have done the same thing. So yes, my name is Mark, and I'm a clamp hoarder. As I'm loading up the last few racks, I realized that I missed an important safety step. Notice that there's nothing preventing the clamps from falling off the brackets. The simple fix? A self-tapping screw that's left proud of the surface. Boom, clamp security system activated. All right, let's take it for a spin. Help with the lock screw. Man, I can't tell you how excited I am to finally have easy access to my clamps again. It's just gonna make such a huge difference in my workflow. The other thing is we sometimes have classes here and seminars, and we have to clear the floor. So the fact that this can move out of the way, perfect. Now we are gonna have plans available for this if you want to purchase them, and I suggest using that as a starting point. This is so customizable depending on what kind of clamps you have, how you want to arrange them, but I do want to make sure I give you a couple of tips. You always want to put as much weight as possible down below. Now I can't say I fully succeeded with that here because to maximize the space I had to mount above. But ultimately, these handles, right, that's where a lot of the weight of these clamps are, those are all dropped down. So as much as is reasonable, you put as much weight as you can below and keep the top as light as possible. Another thing, you never really want to move it by pushing on the top. You're just kind of asking for trouble. Now, I don't think this thing is going to tip, even if I do push it from the top. But when I move it, I'm moving it with a low center of gravity down here just to make sure we aren't tempting fate. And I just want to say as a disclaimer, I'm not an engineer. I mentioned that before. This is just built to the best of my abilities, as sturdy as I think it needs to be. And I think it'll also work for you too. But I have to say, you guys have to apply your own common sense to this and build it to your standards and make sure it's safe enough for your shop. All right. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys have fun building something like this, and send me pictures because I love to be inspired by your work as well. Thanks for watching. People haven't seen you in a while. Come here. Come here. You want to help? You want to help, boy? No biting. No.
What you doing? Oh yeah.